What up, guys, and welcome back to Real Talk Sports with Rico. Today, I will be your host. Today's show, we are actually talking about the latest NBA trade that just happened here with the Phoenix Suns and talking about what they have brought back with Bradley Beal, shipping off Chris Paul, how this will either help or hurt Phoenix. I'll also be talking about Victor Wembanyama and what his impact would be with the Spurs. Does he win more titles than the Joker himself, who is probably the best big man in the league, I would say? And we'll also be talking a little bit more about what it means to actually shape a big three now in the NBA. So very excited for that. Got some good content for you guys. Got some videos that'll show here. But before we actually start and jump into it, I just want to thank Spotify for giving us a platform for the podcast. You can go ahead and catch us on YouTube as well. That's under Real Talk Sports with Rico. You can go ahead and like and subscribe and follow us there. Generally, we drop a show every Sunday, guys. If not, it is there the next day on the Monday. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. And one more shout out. Let me thank the fans out there who have chimed in on a week-to-week basis here to help us drive content to the show. Now let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. So, yeah, I mean, let's first and foremost, let's start off here with the Phoenix Suns and breaking down what they have done here to essentially ship Chris Paul away, and they've also shipped Landry Shambert away as well to go ahead and reportedly make this deal. Obviously, the details of the deal is not all done just yet. And it is very interesting here because this leaves a roster that I think is going to be very top heavy. I think the Phoenix Suns were very top heavy last year in the playoffs. And remember what I told you guys. I was like, they're going to be very exciting to watch. And I said that they were essentially injury away. What happened? Chris Paul got injured. What happened? They lost. And so, going and breaking down this particular, instance, I think that really, to be honest with you, with Bradley Bill coming over here, I think you are honestly looking at the same thing. I think you're looking at the same thing here. I think that you're looking at a team that is destined here to basically repeat itself. It's going to look very sexy at first. They're going to score a lot of points. They're going to be on Sports Center. Everybody's going to hype them up. But at the end of the day, they're going to lose more depth on the roster as far as shooting is concerned. They still don't address the elephant in the room with DeAndre Jordan. And I know that they've made him happy by going out and getting Frank Vogel and firing their coach, and then when you get rid of Chris Paul, there was the instance where you were hearing a lot of analysts say that they were playing slower with Chris Paul, which may be true, but also Chris Paul was very decisive. He was very good at getting the offensive set. And no matter how you look at it, Chris Paul has always won in every situation that he's been in. He took New Orleans, who was terrible when he got in there, was rookie of the year, took them to a playoff team. He has taken OKC to a playoff. He has taken the Rockets as far as they could go to a playoff series. He took Phoenix back to the finals, in which they hadn't been there since Charles Barkley had been there. And I'm guaranteeing it. Okay. I'm saying that right. I'm guaranteeing that Chris Paul will lead the Washington Wizards. If he's there, he will lead the Washington Wizards to a playoff berth next year. And I guarantee you that Phoenix is going to end the year exactly where they left off last year. They're not any better than, I would say, a second round Western Conference Finals out. I still don't think that they're going to be able to stop teams like the Lakers when it comes to Anthony Davis. They still don't have an answer for Nikola Jokic or Jamal Murray. I don't even think that they don't have an answer for Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. And the reason I say that is because those teams are more complete. And Phoenix now, when you lose Chris Paul, you're going to have to now go to Cameron Payne, who was the 14th overall pick at one point in time. He's had his struggles in the league. I mean, he's even had to go over to China there to play and then come back here. Um, I think he's played on about 4 or 5 teams here in, so many years being in the league. And now you're saying that he's essentially going to be your starting point guard. And that's just a tall order, I think for Phoenix here as you're looking at some 2K play here as I talk about this. And one thing that I will say too, in looking at Chris Paul and what Phoenix is essentially losing here, I mean, they're essentially losing a guy who has averaged 17.9 points a game. He's averaged 9 assists a game, and he also has averaged 4 rebounds a game. This is a guy that is a 12-time All-Star. He has been a Rookie of the Year candidate as well, or won it actually, not a candidate. He has won it. So he's been a Rookie of the Year winner. And I mean, you're looking at the numbers right now on the screen, and this is, with Stat Moose. So shout out to them. This season I know is a bit of a down season with the 13 points, the 4 rebounds, but he was still at 8.9 assists per game. That's just about an assist under where he's been at for the career. And, here's a guy that essentially he had to take the back seat with Kevin coming over, with Devin Booker stepping up as well. So I could see where the offensive numbers took a little bit of a dip. They also were a little bit more, I guess, they were a little bit more caring, I think, for Chris Paul this year as far as, taking his injuries and rest in consideration as well. That's what Monty Williams and that staff chose to do, which I think was good as well. It sucked that eventually he did end up getting hurt. I think he hurt his groin. But man, I just think that, yeah, this is we're making a bunch of nothing with this Suns trade. Like, I don't see that this is going anywhere. You're losing a guy like this. You're bringing in Bradley Beal, and I get it. It looks great. Here's a guy, again, he's coming in with the 23.2 points per game last season, 3.9 rebounds, the 5.4 assist. It looks great, and this is according to Stat Moose as well. But here's a guy that has only played 90 games in 2 seasons. So if you wanted to talk about Chris Paul, you wanted to talk about the injuries and how he slows down the roster, what difference is it gonna make if Bradley Beal's not even out there? Here's a guy that has battled wrist injuries. I think he had to get the wrist surgery. Here's a guy that has battled knee injuries. He's had the ankle injuries. He lost a lot of time, I think, to COVID as well. And it really is tough because he signed the max contract. I think he had actually reached the All-Star team either 3 or 4 times as well. Really elevated his numbers. Definitely showed that he could be a face of a franchise. And it's just one of those things where Washington, unfortunately, they weren't able to really build around him. And so now you're putting him in a situation where he is a ball dominant player. He does take a lot of shots. He's more of a volume player. I get that Bradley Beal is a bit more efficient, but to me, Devin Booker and him, they're exactly the same player. I'm not really sold on their point guard play. When you look at Phoenix's roster, it scares me a lot because now let's say that DeAndre Jordan gets into foul trouble. That means that you have Biyombo as the backup center here. And aside from that, they don't really have too much else there. I know they do have what is the kid from St. Mary's here, Jock Lindell. That's the only other size that they have here. They're a bit short at the wing. Now that they've let go of Miles Bridges, they depend heavily on Josh Okogie, who hasn't really shown that he is a consistent offensive player, even though he's looked a lot better. TJ Warren still hasn't gotten quite back to where he was when he was a bubble sensation for Phoenix before he was actually traded off to the Nets here. And then essentially after that, you do have Terrence Ross, who is on the roster. I believe he was in the 6-man consideration. Didn't really play a whole bunch or really play a big role once he got traded over to from Orlando this year, which kind of scares me moving forward for Phoenix. And I just, again, guys, I don't like the deal. I think that Phoenix is right where they've left off. I know that they have now moved up to third, I believe, in the NBA championship ratings or whatever they do in Vegas here. They're thirds odds or whatever behind the Celtics and Denver to repeat. But as is, the Phoenix Suns do not have a championship roster to compete with Denver. I don't even think, like I said, that they could really compete with Golden State when they retool, because Golden State's going to go out here and get some free agents that are ready to go. Um, you can expect for Denver to be good. You can expect for Memphis to be a lot better than what they were. Obviously, I know that they have their situation with Ja Morant, but they're going to be a lot better than what they were, with barring no injuries and things like that. They're going to be a lot better. The T Wolves, depending on what they're going to do, I think the Rockets are definitely going to be in consideration here now that they've got a new coach over there, and there's talk that they could possibly bring Van Fleet over there. There's talk that Portland's going to be a lot better now that the Bulls are actually shopping Zach LaVine. There's the talk that Zach LaVine may get shipped there to go along with the young pieces that Portland has. And it's just none of those teams that I've mentioned. I don't think Phoenix is going to be able to really mix it up with those guys in the latter half of a playoff series. So, that's just my thoughts here. I think that this is going to be a situation where Phoenix is going to regret this. They're hugely over the cap space with all this money that they're bringing in. This is an all-in deal. And I would say that if this thing does not work out, somebody is absolutely getting fired. That is for sure, guys. And moving forward here, I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to talk about, what it means now with the big three and why I think that this is pretty much, this is, I think, a doomed thing for Phoenix, and why this, I don't think it really will work moving forward, in the NBA, with the whole big three situation. And so to do that, I'm actually going to bring up some stats here and I'm going to show you guys some rosters. And I'm just going to show you what the difference is now. We talked about Phoenix. I talked a little bit about their roster, and I'll go over it real quick before I bring up this actual slide here. But with Phoenix, like I said, you have Kevin Durant. Okay. You have Devin Booker. You have Cameron Payne, Josh Okogie, Saban Lee, Damian Lee, TJ Warren, Ish Wainwright, Landry Shambert's no longer there because he's supposedly going to be gone in the trade. But here is a list of the big three teams since we started to call it, quote unquote, the big three, right? So bringing up statistically here, looking at over here, we got the Celtics 2007 to 2008. And look at the difference, right, between the team here with the Miami Heat and this team actually won. It might have been slightly different from the first year when LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh got together. But I just wanted to show you guys in comparison, man. Like, look at this. I mean, the Celtics had Ray Allen, right? They had Tony Allen, who was an elite defender. You had PJ Brown, which was a very good in-between forward, still elite level. They had Sam Cassell, who had won championships with the Houston Rockets there. You had Big Baby Davis here coming out of LSU. He was a rookie that year. He played extremely well with the energy. You had Kevin Durant, who was still playing, or Garnett, who was playing at still at a high Hall of Fame level. You had Eddie House, which was a terrific knockdown shooter, originally came in the league with the Miami Heat. Kendrick Perkins, I believe he was in his first or second year there, coming straight out of high school, if I'm not mistaken. Paul Pierce, we obviously know what he was able to bring to the table. Scott Pollard played a lot of great years with the Sacramento Kings before kind of coming over there. You had James Posey. Posey had some championship experience with the Miami Heat. Initially, when Shaquille O'Neal was there and Dwayne Wade was there, I think he won a ring with those guys. Here's another guy that was an extremely good athlete. I think he was a very good high jumper for the University of Miami and a great jump shooter. You had Leon Poe, which was basically another version of PJ Brown. And with him, he was a lot like he brought a lot of energy. He had great size. He could step out and hit the mid range jumper, attack the rim very well. And then you had a young Rajon Rondo on this roster as well, right? Comparatively speaking, here, so I'm going to move myself out the way so you guys can see this. You had Joel Anthony over there, which was again an undrafted player that Miami had found that this guy was actually pretty good here. You had Chris Bosh. Obviously, you know what he was. Chris Bosh was basically the architect, I think, of positionless basketball. And a lot of people now should really thank Chris Bosh because he opened it up for a lot of people to play the five and be able to step out and shoot the three, run the break. Like this guy was basically that guy that really opened it up, I think, for the rest of the league, before everybody started to go out there and play pretty much positionless basketball. You had Shane Battier, an elite defender that had come over from the Grizzlies at the time. He was playing on a league minimum. Mario Chalmers, who was in NCAA champion for Kansas. They got him via the draft. They got Cole Norris, who was another low pick, undrafted player that actually played a lot like Mario Chalmers, but he was a knockdown 3-point shooter. You had Eddie Curry, who was actually a lottery pick for the Chicago Bulls. They actually brought him in the league. He was from Chicago, straight out of high school. Came in and he played with Tyson Chandler. He was coming over from the New York Knicks at that time. You had, let's see, Udonis Haslam, who's retiring this year. He was still effective on the team. Juwan Howard, obviously, part of the Fab Five. You had James Jones, who is actually the VP of basketball operations, I think, for the Phoenix Suns. So he's responsible actually for putting the players on the floor for the Phoenix Suns now. You have Mike Miller, who is actually the rookie of the year coming out of Florida. Great 3-point shooter, definitely a knockdown shooter there. You had Dexter Pittman, remember him briefly, but Ronnie Turioff there played for Gonzaga, and then you have Dwayne Wade. Now, recently with the team that we mentioned here with Phoenix, you'll notice that the difference is between the Celtics and the Miami Heat, these two teams, they have a lot more depth there. They had a lot more players who were able to sign under the minimum. And some of these superstars, too, the contracts were a lot different because at those times, the collective bargaining agreement was different, which means the luxury tax was different as well. And that's why when you look at these teams that now form as big three teams, they look good on paper and they're top heavy, but generally they don't have a lot of depth to go along with it. Look at the Nets and their situation, right? They had James Harden, they had Kyrie Irving, they had Kevin Durant. And if I gave you $1 million, you probably couldn't name three other players that were on that roster, right? Because essentially you don't even have enough money to go out there and offer really a whole bunch of vet minimums actually to get some guys over there, which makes it even tougher for teams now to just load up and do the big three situation, especially when a lot of the guys are not doing essentially what the Miami Heat did, because the Miami Heat, the reason that they were able to actually get some more pieces and hold this thing together is because Dwayne Wade, if you look at his contract, was varsity and like just fairly underpaid, guys, when you look at this. And that's why he essentially left for Chicago for that year or so, because he wanted to get paid money and they didn't want to pay him the money. And he left to Chicago to get paid his money. And he had said that he had given up so much money and the Miami Heat just didn't want to pay him at the time. You look at who is it? LeBron James, he still got paid money. He did take a bit of a pay cut, and so did Chris Bosh for this thing to work. But as far as like Kevin and these guys like that, when you look at the contract and how much money the Phoenix is going to have to allocate to these guys, I mean, it is a situation, guys, where it's I'm not sure what they're going to be able to get over there. They've also given up a ton of draft capital as well. So even if this thing were to work out somewhat, once those guys are done, Phoenix is the cupboard is bare. Like they have nothing. I mean, just absolutely nothing. They have leveraged their future essentially to get Bradley Beal, and they leveraged their future when they got Kevin Durant. They gave New Jersey their first round pick. So this is why you need to be wary of super teams, okay, guys? And this is what do we learn from super teams? Super teams have evolved since 2007, 2008, and they're never going to be the same as they were before. And the reason the Celtics were able to get what they got is because they got a lot of these guys in trades. Remember this, they traded for Kevin Garnett, they traded for Ray Allen, right? And also, Boston didn't give up a lot of draft capital. By this time, Seattle was willing to go ahead and walk away from Ray Allen at that time because that's where he was playing in his second club because he started with Milwaukee. And then with Kevin Garnett in his situation, it was essentially one of those things where he was at the end of a contract for the most part. He knew he didn't want to go back to Minnesota. They were saying that they wanted to start over and trade him. They knew that they weren't going to get much of anything. And I think because they moved him, they basically got a pick, which turned into the Kevin Love situation. And Kevin Love worked out in Minnesota. I get it. But Boston didn't give up a whole bunch of draft capital. I mean, they were terrible, and that's why they were able to give that pick to Minnesota. But that's the difference. Miami got all their guys in free agency, and they got guys that were actually selfless and ended up taking low amounts of money to make this thing work. And then they knew, or LeBron knew at the time, that he needed to get shooters around him to go along with the dynamics of Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in order to get that greatness and get that ring. Um, and that's why you see him struggle now at this time in his career because, yeah, they have Anthony Davis. Yeah, they have him, but they gave up a lot of draft capital to get Anthony Davis. Those two guys make a lot of money. And because of the collective bargaining agreement, you don't have enough money to go out there and get guys like Mike Miller or a James Jones or a James Posey or a Leon Poe or Eddie House or a Sam Cassell. Like those guys, you can't afford them. You just can't afford them, man. And that's the difference in the NBA. And that's why I think that you're looking at a Phoenix team that is bound to really struggle, right? They are bound to really struggle moving forward here. And so now that leads me to my last topic of the day, and that is talking about Victor Wembanyama and his impact on the San Antonio Spurs. And the question is, and I saw this too on PTI, is will he win more titles than Nikola Jokic at this point in time? And I'm going to say no at this point in time. And I think that when you look at Nikola Jokic and you look at Denver, I think Denver is constructed to win multiple championships, barring any injuries. Okay, that's the one thing that Denver has been able to avoid is major injuries, especially with Nikola Jokic. They've shown that they're able to survive with Nikola Jokic, but they have not been able to thrive without Jamal Murray. Now, Jamal Murray has had a major injury. Okay. Now he's coming back from the knee and everything else, and he's finally back to where he is. Now, if he were to take a major injury, then I think that that would definitely affect Denver. Um, and it would definitely affect the Joker as far as winning more rings. I think when it's all said and done, I think he probably does win another one. Um, Now, it's not it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't end up a lot like Giannis and maybe he gets that one and injuries derail a team. And so I just talked about what could happen with Jamal Murray. Chris Middleton reportedly just had a knee surgery. He's had I think 2 or 3 knee surgeries within, maybe 2 or 3 years, right? He really hasn't been the same player since they made the NBA Finals, and look at what happened to the Milwaukee Bucks. That's how quickly the fortune of a team can change just like that. Now, in comparison to Victor Wembanyama, okay, so he looks great. He's 7'4". He has the playing skills a lot like what a Kevin Durant is, and he can do what Nikola Jokic can do as far as get down in the paint. He can shoot the outside jumper, he can pass the ball, he can dribble it, he can handle it, he can run the break and things like that. The question is he going to be able to hold up in the NBA? From what I understand, I hear that he has an elite training staff. They're saying that they have, went ahead and they're preparing his body for that grind. And they're saying a lot of people feel like that this guy is going to prove the critics wrong. I really hope so. I had a lot really of belief in like Chat Holmgren coming out of Gonzaga last year, and Chad Holmgren got hurt playing in a pro-am league in Seattle. So I hope that this doesn't happen to Victor Wembanyama, excuse me. But one thing that's going to factor into Victor Wembanyama as well is you have to look at the teams that Victor Wembanyama is inheriting with the Spurs. Yes, he's getting Greg Popovich, who is probably a master CEO. Here's a guy that he drafted Tim Duncan, and you saw how great that was in Hall of Famer. You're looking at Kawhi Leonard, who has been a Finals MVP, and I'm sure he'll probably go down as a Hall of Famer when the numbers are all settled and done. Popovich has won in the NBA Finals before. He's coached in the Olympics and things like that. But Victor Wembanyama, they're comparing him as like the prospect that could be the prospect that would basically carry the game. And those players only come along once in a lifetime. A lot of people thought it was going to be Zion Williams. Now Zion Williams is there's talk about him being traded. We'll talk about that in later shows. But if you're going to compare him to, like, say, I think some of the prodigies out there, starting with LeBron James, LeBron averaged 20 points a game, 5 assists a game, and 5 rebounds a game. But more importantly, he was able to take Cleveland and make it an 18-game difference. And what do I mean by that? He took that team from a 17-team win season the year before to a 35-47 win, an 18-game difference. They finished 9th in the Eastern Conference, just missed the playoffs. I do remember that. The very next year, that's when they started to make the playoffs. That's when they started to make the noise. Obviously, by his 3rd or 4th year, they got to play in the finals. They lost, got swept by the Spurs. And then you look at Melo, who came out in that draft, right? Another prodigy, very good. Took Denver to 43-39. Denver made the playoffs. Melo averaged 21 points. He had 6 rebounds and 2 assists a game, right? Victor Wembanyama could put up the numbers, but the difference is going to be the teams that he plays on. And so this is what I mean by that. So right now you're taking a look here at the screen, and I'm showing you actually what LeBron had on the right. You're looking at what Carmelo had on the left here. Okay. So let's start here with the right. When LeBron was a rookie, he had Carlos Boozer, who was a very good player. This is right before, I believe, he went over to Utah, right, and played with Darren Williams, and his career took off there. Carlos Boozer was very good on this team. I think some nights he actually could have been the 2nd or 3rd best player. You're looking at Dejana Drop, who actually went on to play with the he played with the Dallas Mavericks, and won a title with them, I believe. I believe he was on the 2011 team. You look at Zylgastas, right? This guy was very good. I think he was probably the 2nd best player on the team, center. Actually was a bit of a stretch 5. he got slower in his later years. He played with LeBron in that first year that he went to Miami. Didn't get him a chance to get him a title. I think he retired that year. You look at Jason Capono. Jason Capono was an excellent shooter out of UCLA, and a great fit to go around with LeBron James. And I think he actually ended up winning one with the Miami Heat. Jeff McGinnis, a very good player out of North Carolina, had some very good years with the Clippers later on. Kevin Ollie, he was the coach of UConn. If you remember, UConn actually won the NCAA championship with him being the coach there. Um, so he was a very good player for Philly. He was a very good player here for Cleveland as well. Deshaun Wagner was actually the first of the John Calipari prospects to come out and really make noise in the NBA. He's listed as a two guard. He was a lot of what Derrick Rose was before Derrick Rose was there. Unfortunately, he had some health issues, which actually cut his career short, but he was very, very good. And then you look at Eric Williams, who actually was a pretty good player for the Celtics at the time, but he was injured for most of that time. But you look at that roster, and you're looking at a roster that actually was pretty decent. You look at what LeBron James obviously was able to do as a prodigy. He was able to take that team to the next level. You look at Denver, right? You look at Carmelo Anthony. Those guys made the playoffs. They finished sixth the West. But look what he had. He had Chris Anderson, the Birdman. That guy, got a chance to meet him one time when I was with the Clippers, man. And this guy was just, I'm telling you, man, he is, I don't even know why he jumped, right? 6'10, very good player, played hard. I believe he won some rings with Miami as well. I think he was a mid-season free agent pickup for them. Um, John Barry, you remember his brother Rick or Brent Barry, who actually won the dunk contest. John Barry, a pretty good shooter and two guard there. Earl Boykins reminded me a lot of Muggsy Bogues, terrific point guard at 5'5". This guy was excellent as far as getting to the basket there. He was a lot like what Ty Lawson was in later years. If you've ever watched him play for UNC, that guy was like a triple double machine at that size. Incredible. Michael Doliak, a very good player from Kansas. He was a very good pick and pop player. And he was tough too, man. He played a lot bigger than what he actually was. You look at Neme Hilario. This guy was he was a bit of a brute force as well inside, and he was one of those guys that again he could step away from the basket, wasn't afraid to dunk on you as well. Very tough guy. Rashawn Leonard, a very good shooter that played for Miami before he came over there to Denver. He was a lot like what Dell Curry was, which was Steph Curry's dad. They used to come off a lot of staggered screens. Think of a lot of Rip Hamilton in him, Allen Houston. That's what Vashawn Leonard was. Andre Miller was probably one of the smartest point guards I had ever seen play in the NBA. I mean, he would be equivalent to what Chris Paul is, okay? Because the way he was able to control games, he wasn't like hugely athletic. It wasn't like he could just jump out the gym or anything like that, but he was a very, very great point guard on both ends of the floor. He could defend and he also could play offense. Very good. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, out of the roster there, you look at the roster, comparatively speaking, here to what the Spurs have currently here. This is what Victor Wembanyama would be inheriting, right? And this is counting that the Spurs don't make very many moves. And you're looking too at the FA, which means free agents here. They got a lot of different things to think about here, okay? Because okay, they have Blake Wesley on the roster. You have Devin Vessel, who has played very well. Jeremy Sokin coming out of Baylor. He's played very well. He's had some up and downs, trying to be a bit more consistent. Romeo Langford, a guy that the Boston Celtics gave up on and drafted. You're wondering if he'll be able to turn the page and be a bit of a two-way player. Zach Collins was a lottery pick coming out of, I believe it was Gonzaga. Yeah, I want to say Gonzaga at the time. He was a stretch five that basically could shoot the three. And man, he really never developed, man. Injuries. And you were thinking this would be a guy that would be a lot like, I think they were looking for more like a Laurel marketing player. Haven't really been able to get that. And I'm not sure if that's really going to be a great fit once they get Victor Wembanyama there, because they kind of want to do about the same thing with the ball and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if that's going to work. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, you look at Trey Jones, a guy that's a point guard coming out of Duke. Um, so yeah, comparatively speaking, Victor Wembanyama at 19, looking at this roster currently that the Spurs have, it's going to be very challenging to say that this guy is instantly going to go off and put himself in a situation to win rings, and a lot of rings at that right now. It's also going to be questionable to see how good he's going to be early on. You know, when you look at these two rosters beside him, even though a lot of the lifting was done by Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James on these rosters, they still had pretty good players to go around them. Victor Wembanyama doesn't have very good players here, which means that a lot of the load is going to be on his shoulders. And for 82 games, you know that rookies actually eventually do reach a certain barrier or a wall, right, in that situation. And so that would be my thing there. You know he's going to get to a wall. You know he's going to get to a point in time where, he's going to need some help. And I'm not sure that the Spurs necessarily are going to be able to go out and get a whole bunch of free agents to bring over there and give him that added help here. And so, with that being said, guys, that is kind of what we did here as far as breaking it down with Victor Wembanyama, what his impact is going to be on the Spurs. We talked about what this means for the Phoenix Suns in this big draft, or not this big draft, but this big trade that they have made. We talked about that. And I have just shown you as well why I think that big three situations in the NBA no longer work. And I think that you have to have not only stars, but you have to have a full roster to go along with your stars to actually win championships now, especially with the way the salary cap is designed, the way it is with the players wanting the money and things like that. I just don't think that you're able to mimic what LeBron and those guys were able to do in 2010, nor do I think you're going to be able to mimic what the Celtics were able to do in 2007. And with that being said, guys, that is today's show. So I want to go ahead and thank once again Spotify for being our platform. I want to go ahead and thank Anchor as well. That is where we actually first started the podcast before it was taken over there by Spotify. I want to go ahead and thank all the fans out there who have actually chimed in on a week-to-week basis here to help us drive content to the show, and let you know once again that you can actually go ahead and check us out on YouTube. If you follow Real Talk Sports with Rico, we're there. Once again, up on the upper left here, you're seeing that the show does drop every Sunday. And if it's not there uploaded, you will see it there the following day. And once again, guys, I just want to thank you guys out there who have listened patiently with us as we've grown here on the show. We got some special shows coming up. I can't wait to talk here about the NBA draft, which is coming up Thursday. I'm thinking that we are going to do a show here where we talk about the prospects here and at least round one, what the implications are going to be here. I briefly mentioned that some big names are going to be moved here, and I think rightfully so. One of those names is going to be Zion Williams. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why I think my Bulls will move Zach LaVine and get into the draft class this year and actually go out there and get them an impact player. We'll be talking about some more trades that we hope do happen here in the NBA and the association, guys. So much more to come here with Real Talk Sports with Rico. But until the next show, I will see you guys on the next one. This is Rico, Real Talk Sports, guys. I will see you guys on the next show. Take care.